Chapter 12, Battle with the Rangers. By the time the band of horse traders had reached the old village camp, it was mid-October, a year since Thad's kidnapping from home. After seeing with his own eyes how cruel his captors could be, he found it difficult to feel as friendly toward them as before. He tried to keep in mind what Johnny Ainsworth had said about hating Comanches. The Comanches are living their lives as they had been raised to live them, but for the present, Thad was tired, and he missed the encouraging visits with Miss Sally Buchanan. He supposed everyone lived his life as he had been taught to live it, but he did not like the way the Comanches had been taught to live theirs. Thad had one big worry. What had happened to Melissa and Little Bit? He could call to mind every incident of their escape, and he could hear again the hoofbeats of Little Bit fading out toward sunrise. Had they made it home? Where were they now? Would his brothers know where he was and come in search of him? These questions went around and around in his brain. If anything had happened to Melissa, he felt it was his fault for getting her started on such a dangerous journey. The camp was still on the move toward the north. As the days went by, he walked for hour after hour in the dust of the moving village, along with some Indian women and children. So many of the horses had been traded off that there were not enough for all to ride. Thad was generally too tired and cold and miserable to think of anything, even home or loved ones. He could not even hope or pray when night came. So many of the horses had been traded off that there was not enough for all to ride. Thad was generally too tired and cold and miserable to think of anything, even home or loved ones. He could not even hope or pray when night came. When he dropped with his smelly old robe wrapped around him, he immediately fell into a deep sleep. At evening when the band stopped, Thad was dispatched to gather wood for the cook fires. Then he helped Little Rabbit set up Yellow Cloud's teepee. That meant dragging the lodge poles from the side of the poor, tired ponies and unrolling the heavy buffalo hide cover from the travois. Thad carried his robe strapped over his shoulder. It was his only possession. He sometimes worried about his appearance, imagining it to be that of a neglected, weather-beaten scarecrow. He thought of his ragged buckskin, his face streaked with dirt, his hair a thatch of dirty straw. He felt pretty sorry for himself sometimes. The fact was, he was beginning to feel like a Comanche youngster himself, and he disliked the idea. Finally, Yellow Cloud decided to give the villagers a chance to rest and find some meat. It became bitterly cold as the northerners swept down across the plains and whistled around the camp all of one day and night. Thad thought longingly of the snug front room at their home where the family gathered to sit out the northerners. They would crack pecans, play dominoes, and tell stories. He thought he would die of homesickness. One day, a band of young hunters returned to camp leading ponies loaded with buffalo and antelope meat. The camp was full of excitement as they galloped in, with old women screaming, children shouting, and dogs barking. Anyone who thinks of Indians as a strong, silent type should visit a Comanche village when there is excitement afoot. But the hunters brought news that stirred up more excitement than the meat did. "We saw long knives," two answers reported. The elders began to question him, while Thad, Scarponi, and the other boys listened. "How many long knives?" Buffalo Horn wanted to know. Two Ances held up his hand with fingers spread, dropped them, and raised them again until it indicated 30. "Did you give them battle?" Yellow Cloud asked. "No, there were too many. They had many guns and wanted to parley. We did not wish battle. We were too few and had come to hunt." "For what did they wish to parley?" Yellow Cloud asked. "They were hunting buffalo as we were," two Ances explained, "but they wanted to ask if we had seen a white boy and girl that Comanches took many moons ago." "What'd you tell them?" "We told them that we knew of no white boy or girl in any Comanche camp." It suddenly struck Thad that he was the boy and Melissa the girl the Long Knives were asking about. Then he realized what they meant. If the men were inquiring for both boy and girl, then Melissa and Little Bit had never reached home. They had plenty of time, months. If they were not at home by this point, they were either dead or had been captured by some other band of Indians. Perhaps they had been captured by another tribe. Thad was more discouraged than ever as they traveled along toward the Indian Territory. As they traveled each day toward Indian Territory, and he realized that they were getting farther and farther from his home, he would awake in the night and cry. He even quit saying his prayers. One night, another northerner blew down on them, howling and screaming and moaning and bringing a bitter, piercing cold. Thad lay on his buffalo robe with his teeth chattering. The mournful wind seemed to him to be sorrowing for his loved ones. Perhaps the sorrow was for Melissa too, Thad thought. If she and Little Bit had not reached home, some terrible thing must have happened to them. Did they get lost? Did she die of exposure? Maybe some of Yellow Cloud's braves had killed her. But where was Little Bit? If the people of the village had taken Little Bit again, they would have brought her back. But she had never appeared among the ponies of the herd since Melissa rode away with her. Scarponi had boasted that he would bring his blackbird back, but he had never done it. The morning after the northerners struck, rain and sleet began. It whipped about the camp, drenching the people, even cutting their skin. The ponies huddled together with their tails to the wind. Thad was sure he would have died in that storm had it not been for keeping active, fetching wood and helping feed the fires. At last the storm blew itself out. The sun came forth, shining on the white and frozen world. Thad was gathering wood early one morning when he heard the pounding of hoofs. A mounted brave splashed through the water a little way from him. He recognized the rider as Mad Raven, a member of a small hunting party that had gone in search of meat. A scout had located a small herd of buffalo only a few miles from the camp. Mad Raven's horse was lathered, and bloody foam blew in flecks from his mouth. Something was up. What did the hunters run into? Thad hurried to gather his load of wood and started back toward camp. He wondered if the hunters had run into white men again. He hoped fervently that they had. Scar Pony, Running Fox, Boy Who Laughs, and Small Weasel joined Thad as they hurried toward Yellow Cloud's lodge. They would stay as near the council fire as they dared, to listen to the news. They soon had the gist of it. Our braves fought with long knives, Running Fox said. The women and girls behind them broke into scornful laughter at this. A girl threw a rock that hit Thad in the back. Another ran up and spit on him. Thad paid no heed. Our braves killed many long knives, Small Weasel boasted. White men run away. Thad was pretty sure Small Weasel knew as little as he did about it, so he tried a little boasting of his own. White men do not run away, ever, he said. Scar Pony said quietly, We have not heard what happened. We know only that there was a battle. Thad listened attentively as the story was told from the beginning. Medicine Dog shot a buffalo, Mad Raven was saying. He missed and fired 2 more times. Other men shot arrows at the bull. It was a long way from where Medicine Dog was. The Long Knives heard the shots. They came on their horses running. The same white man you saw 10 suns ago? Yellow Cloud asked. Mad Raven hesitated. Were the white men settlers or rangers? I think some settlers, some rangers. Some rode all together like soldiers, only they did not have the U.S. on their saddles like soldiers. He drew the letters in the sand. Yellow Cloud nodded empathetically. They are rangers. How many do you think? Maybe 10 settlers, 30 rangers? Yellow Cloud and the other men made a clucking noise with their tongues. We'd go help our hunters, Yellow Cloud snapped. At a sign from him, the braves hurried from the lodge to get their weapons. A few minutes later, they pounded out of the village on their horses, armed to the teeth and striped and painted for battle. There were about 60 of them. Only Yellow Cloud and Buffalo Horn wore the war bonnets of eagle feathers. Yellow Cloud's hung down to his horse's back. Thad was dazed. A few miles away were his own people. Maybe they were not his own brothers, but at least they were folks who might take him to his home. He tried to think. If only he could sneak away, he might be able to reach the white men. But Little Rabbit was a jump ahead of him. She seized him by the shoulder and snapped him. You spotted boy, you no run away, you work. She set him to work, helping break camp, for they were getting ready to travel again. Thad worked automatically while his mind went around and around. Over and over he prayed, Oh Lord, help our people win. Yellow Cloud's teepee was the last one in the village to come down. Thad was helping Little Bit roll the hide cover of it when the sound of battle reached their ears. Faraway shots, Indian yells, an occasional shout from the white men. Thad was bursting with excitement. Was his release at hand? Suddenly the sound increased in volume. The beating of hoofs became louder as the warriors were driving back into the village. White men were yelling now too. They're winning! They're winning! Our men are winning! Thad yelled in Comanche, jumping up and down. Suddenly he was seized from behind. A hand was clasped over his mouth and a claw gag stuffed into it and fastened. His hands and feet were bound. He was pushed under a heap of buffalo robes that lay beside the pile of lodge poles in the rolled-up cover of Yellow Cloud's teepee. He fought and kicked against his fetters, but he was so tightly bound that he could scarcely move. He gagged over the wad of cloth, and he was unable to bring a sound from his throat. He finally concluded that the best thing was to do was to lie still. Surely, he thought, if the white men took the village, they would look under every pile of robes. Then something plump fell down upon him. It felt like a person sitting on the robes that covered him. He learned later it was a very old woman, who looked as though her rickety bones might fall apart at any moment. The sounds of battle came nearer until they were in the village all around him. The firing ceased, but they could hear the men's voices, white men's voices. He tried to yell, to make some sort of noise, but it was of no use. He thought, they're searching the village. Surely they will find me. He wondered if Reader Giles or Mr. Johnny Answorth were among them. He lost consciousness from lack of air. The next thing he knew, he was being hauled roughly from the heap of robes. The Comanches had relied on mercy of the white men not to disturb any apparently sick old woman. The Comanches had never been known to spare anyone because of age or helplessness in their raids of the white, but they knew the white men were different, and had taken advantage of this to keep Thad a prisoner. As the boy gradually returned to his senses, everything in the village was in tumult. Wailing for the dead had begun. Heaps of family possessions were scattered, and women and children were gathering them together. Thad knew that the white men had turned them over and searched for him. Many of the horses had been shot or driven away. A feeling of bitter sorrow was in the air. Thad wondered how the defeat of his captors would affect their treatment of him. He had been treated with a measure of respect and friendliness, for the Indians admired a person with spunk and courage. This was one of the saddest days of the boy's captivity. That morning he had believed himself in the hands of friends. Now he found himself in the most serious danger of his life. As he sat on the ground trying to recover from the near suffocation, he was kicked by almost every villager, man, woman, who passed by, and the boys and girls of his own age spit upon him, all but Scar Pony, Boy Who Laughs, and Running Fox. They stayed away. He was sore at heart and broken spirit. As the days passed, the villagers disposed of their dead, and the mourning and wailing. Thad tried to tell himself, serves them right. But somehow he felt himself grieving with them. He had known several of the young warriors who had been killed in the battle, and he felt sorry about them. He could not find in his heart to hate them now, regardless of what they had done to him. 8 of the warriors had been killed, and a number of horses had been driven away. The horses that remained were loaded to the limit. To Thad and to every woman and girl, an extra bundle was given to carry. Travel was slow and skies were gray. As they neared their destination, a steady drizzle fell. Scarponi often walked beside Thad. Scarponi seemed to sense Thad's keen disappointment and sympathized with him. He said, "Maybe you find your people when you get to agency." Thad had no idea what the agency was like. "What is the agency?" he asked. "Where we are going," Scarponi answered. "It is an Indian territory not far from Fort Sill." Thad had often heard of Fort Sill and of the Indian Territory, but he knew little about them, nor did he know anything of the location of Fort Sill. It did not comfort him to have Scarponi show himself friendly. Thad was sick the last few days of their journey. He had pneumonia, and no wonder, after the exposure of the past few weeks. His chest hurt, his head ached, and he burned with fever. It seemed as though each time he coughed, something tore loose inside him. The thought of food gagged him. Little Rabbit put an old woolen shirt on him. Some poor settler had no doubtless yielded his life for that shirt, but the boy was too little to think of this. It did not occur to Thad to wonder why she would show so much interest in his getting well. Looking back, after many years, he came to believe that Little Rabbit had attached him with a motherly sort of affection. He knew she had lost her 2 sons in battle, one against the white soldiers and against one of the Apaches in New Mexico. As Thad stumbled along, Scarponi took his hand and placed it on his own shoulder. Tears glittered in his dark eyes as he stood by the white boy. "Lean on me," he said. "Scarponi is your friend." A warm surge of gratitude and even love swept through Thad. He knew he would never forget Scarponi's kindness. That night, Little Rabbit covered Thad with robes until he was weighed down. He was so hot beneath him that he thought he could not bear it. But during the night, Little Rabbit came now and then to tuck the covers around him. Just before daylight, he broke into a profuse sweat. It left him weak, but his fever seemed to be broken. Little Rabbit doused him with a bucket of cold water. It took his breath, but then she rubbed him briskly with a scrape of dry hide until he tingled with warmth again. It was a drastic treatment, but it seemed to work. He felt better than he had for a long time, although he was still weak and shaky. Little Rabbit brought him a bowl of steaming broth. "Drink," she ordered. "The broth of antelope will make you strong. The heat will warm you." Thad was as hungry as a mother wolf now. His ribs stuck out almost like barrel staves, and he shook so that he could hardly hold the cup, but the hot brew seemed to pour warmth and strength into him. Scarponi walked beside him again the last day and made him lean on his shoulder. Little Rabbit and Blue Flower could not do enough for him. Even Yellow Cloud came to feel his bones and mutter something about the meatless ribs. Thad was beginning to feel affectionate toward these enemies of his people. Scarponi and Little Rabbit had made his lot as easy as they were able, especially in the last weeks. The people of the village, he thought, might be compared to an assortment of white people. Some were good, some were cruel, and some were indifferent. He kept remembering Mr. Johnny's words, "They live as they have been raised to live." He let that speak for itself. Continue listening.